Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the Garden Report. Been a minute since we've checked in here, but good time to do it. EuroBasket rolls on. And I guess this is the informal start of us previewing the other teams around the East, the other teams around the league, which I'm always interested in doing. And there's a fitting one, the Hawks, who acquired Kristaps Porzingis this offseason. Didn't give a ton back to the Celtics other than the cap relief because George Niang flips over to Utah. We're not going to meet George Niang, or all I had was one flight with him and a few words. So he's off to Utah. And Porzingis making a good first impression for Atlanta, I think, with Latvia in the EuroBasket. She's Lauren Williams. She covers the Hawks for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. What year is this for you? You're muted.
Heading into year 4.
Love it.
Oh my gosh. You think that we're used to this now, right? That we've been doing the Zoom stuff for so many years at this point, but
I know, and I just told you. Okay, so you've talked on the phone with Kristaps Porzingis. You have gotten to watch a little bit of him at this point. You've had a couple months to process what he'll look like here, what he'll bring to the Hawks. And for everybody who's trying to figure out what this will look like, it's good to see he can actually get up and down the floor and play basketball, because last time we watched him in an NBA game, it didn't look like he was capable of that. So that's a step, I guess.
For sure. And I think one of the things that Kristaps talked about when we were on the phone is that he typically plays some of his best basketball after playing that summer. And so you have to kind of think about, when he came back from, Europe, right when he started with the Wizards, he had one of his best seasons. And so I think that's something that Hawks fans can look forward to, is that, some of the rust should hopefully be shaken off. And he's been taking some deep shots from three, some 30-footers, which bodes well for any offense, I think. He's a little bit cold, I think, to start the tournament. And then he had a breakout game, from 3 against Portugal, against, your friend Neemias Queta. But yeah, I think it's just a good start. I think people are happy to see that he can play some significant minutes, some meaningful minutes, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and what was your first reaction to the trade when it happened? Because on my side of things, on the Celtics side, I was hoping that they could figure out a way to keep him around. He's an expiring contract and fit great with Jaylen Brown, who's obviously going to be running this team. They had a great dynamic, which could, speak to what him and Trey might be able to do. But I was hoping, keep him on the books, deal with the tax thing later if the season doesn't start great. Obviously, you look at what the Celtics have at center now, and it's a pretty big hole there that needs to be filled. And they end up saying, okay, we'll trade him for the salary relief here. And what was he able? He was able to go into an exception here, and the Hawks were able to eat most of this money just by sending back Niang, who was making like $8 million. So the two big benefits of this trade for the Celtics were getting off most of the contract here and the tax hit associated with it. This and the holiday trade saved them like $200 million in tax or something like that. And then the fact that you didn't have to give up a pick to move off some of the offsetting money. So that's what it was, right? Terrence Mann went to Brooklyn as the maximum at matching money, and a first round pick went to Brooklyn from Atlanta as well. So Celtics didn't have to give up a pick and didn't have to take back all the money in this trade, because Mann was signed for a couple of years, I believe, right?
Yeah, he was coming in with, he was about to actually start that extension that he signed with the Clippers, making about $11 million per year. And so it definitely freed up some money for the Hawks. I believe they used some of the DeJounte Murray trade exception that would have expired in July from the trade that they made when they sent him to New Orleans and got Dyson Daniels back as well as Larry Nance Jr. But I don't think I was super shocked about the trade. I think I was more so shocked when it happened because the Hawks have always, I think, needed sort of a stretch big. They tried it with Larry Nance Jr., and they've always kind of wanted more size in the front court. And so I think, it was kind of huge for them to be able to get him with this sort of low risk, potentially high reward kind of move. He's making 30 million this year, but it's only for 1 year. And so they can kind of see where he fits in with everything long term. And yeah, it's low risk, potentially high reward.
Yeah, and I think this was clearly a money move from the Celtics perspective because I guess when you think about it, they could have brought back Mann, Niang, and a first for Porzingis, which would have been pretty good value, I think, given what was out there for him. But they offset that to the Nets, save that money, and we'll see what they end up doing with it for next year because they didn't do a ton for now in terms of adding to their roster other than a handful of minimums. So tough to see him go in my mind. I think for the fans, it was time and just based on how it ended. And that was the tough part with him here is he wins a championship. He was great when he was on the floor. I think this last season was statistically his best ever. And when the game started mattering most for some reason or another, it was a calf strain during the finals run, made him miss most of that postseason. Then the weird ankle area injury in the finals knocked him out for most of that series. And then after a rough first round in this postseason, he came down with that illness again and still not a ton of clarity. I think that's where a lot of the frustration from the fans stems from is that they don't understand what happened here. But for me, it was always like he was sick. I don't know what else you can say. And that was pretty clearly the case there because he couldn't move, couldn't get to his spots, could barely get up and down the floor. He had to leave one of the games at halftime over breathing issues. So I'd have to imagine the Hawks in making this trade know that's behind him, and it looks like it is into this tournament. But the weirdest thing was that he missed 8 games in February, came back, looked like himself. He had this awesome game at MSG where he hit like 7-8 threes. And then out of nowhere, after not looking physically limited in the first round, it hit him hard. And I think he said something like he just had this epic crash and could barely play the last handful of games there. I still think it was a mistake to have him on the floor, but who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people have kind of speculated that, yes, the Hawks likely know what his limitations are, and they'll be in constant communication with their medical staff and, their performance staff to make sure that he can perform optimally. And so I do think, too, with some of the moves that they've also made, they've added a bit of, I guess, security to ensure that they have the depth that they've lacked in years past. Obviously they still have Onyeka Okongwu, who has been developing, such a great 3-point shot. It's just kind of getting his volume up at this point. Mo Gay is somebody that played minutes at center, and he's a bright young, prospect still. Technically, he's in year 3, but he's still so young and raw when you think about him starting playing basketball at age 16.
You guys love him.
Love Moke. I think he has so much potential, and the Hawks really like him. He's great defensively. He covers, quite a bit of ground with his wingspan at 6'11". And then they also signed a couple of other, to me, the surprising move was that they added N'Faly Dante from Houston, who was a former two-way player there, and they couldn't quite match the offer sheet that they offered Dante. And then obviously they have their two-way guy in Elian Jaye. So there's so much depth that they don't have to play Porzingis, many minutes if they don't need to. They can go fairly deep.
I don't think
into
they have
the
a
bench.
choice. Like, what's the maximum number of games you expect from him in a season now? Because through 2 years in Boston, he didn't play a single back-to-back as part of management. The most games he played was 57 after 42 this year. They heavily managed him this season. And he missed the start of the year with the surgery, so that went into that too. But he's probably going to play at most 60 games. So that's 22 games where he won't be available at all. You'll have to use Moge, Onyeka
Yeah.
Okongwu. I want to look at
I don't even
Okongwu's
think he
gameplay
makes
as
it to
well.
16.
No, that's like that's the ceiling to me. And then, Okongwu played 74 last year, so that's helpful. 55 the year before that. So he's going to have to be a rock still, obviously, with Capella leaving. But they're going to have to be mixing and matching in the front court, I'd imagine, quite a bit. Jalen Johnson's the other guy who's obviously missed a lot of time here in that front court role. So that's going to be the question with this team. I really like this roster, and we'll get into it in a minute here. But in terms of Porzingis and how they're utilizing him, I'd have to imagine a decent amount of rest. Does that position him as a starter when he's available, or would it make sense to bring him off the bench if he's going to be in and out of the lineup a little bit?
I think because you anticipate him being in and out of the lineup, I think he's coming off the bench. Obviously, that's a very expensive bench player, but if you want to keep your starters as consistent as possible, it's got to be Okongwu, just because he's been the more available of the two when you look at the games that they played over the last couple of seasons. And so, yeah, and I also think it's easier to manage a guy's minutes coming off of the bench versus as a starter, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I just wonder how you'd set him up with Trey as much as possible in that case. I guess you could stagger the lineups a little bit and try to have them play together as much as possible. Even with Porzingis coming off the bench, you could sub in Porzingis quickly, I guess. So he's still going to play a lot regardless, but I do find that interesting. You think he's coming off the bench?
I do think he's coming off the bench, and I think they're going to do, and this is purely just like an educated guess. It's not even anything that I'm hearing, but I do feel like they'll probably, play him with Jalen Johnson and, in that kind of core foundational that we think about with Risa Shea, Dyson Daniels, Trey, and as I mentioned already, Johnson. And so I think they're going to be staggering his minutes with Onyeka Okongwu quite a bit. But one thing that Quinn Snyder always says, it's never about who starts the game, it's about who finishes the game. So I think the question is he finishing games over Okongwu? I think that's the big thing that people should watch for versus
if he's playing at his
starter.
level, he should be. I mean, that's the thing with him, and it's so frustrating still for Celtics fans, I think, is that when he was out there, he was this game-breaking talent, and it really was the cherry on top of this ridiculous super team that, when they were full, when they were all available, was almost impossible to beat. He's out there shooting 41% from three, 48 from the field, had the best post-up numbers in basketball, 19-7, block and a half per game. I thought his defense came a long way in Boston too, so that's another reason you can have him out there late in these games. I love Okongwu, and I'm glad he's getting more opportunity now, potentially a chance to start. But if Porzingis is himself, it's not close. Like, they're going to have Porzingis out there late, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and it begs the question, and I actually was on another podcast earlier this week where they asked if we see minutes where where Jalen plays the three. And so, I mean, is that a finishing lineup where you have
I love it.
Johnson at the three, Porzingis potentially at the 4 or the 5, or Okongwu at the 4 or the 5, Daniels at the
Triple
2, Trey
big.
at the 1.
I love it.
That's just like bananas. But then you also have to factor in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, the possibilities are just endless, I think.
And that's the thing. If this team, and this is the story of the Hawks this year, and we'll get to this in a second, if they can't make it work with this team, that's where the questions are going to start about where this thing's going here. But we'll get to that in a second. I wanted to shout out, since football starts tonight, Prize Picks, the best way to watch football season. And I love it because I drafted 3 fantasy teams over the last week or two here. And you know how it goes. It's going to fall apart fast. Guys are going to get hurt. You didn't pick the right players. So what do? You go over to Prize Picks because you can pick a new team every single week over there. Start over, get the players you want, start to adjust to what's happening this season. I like it way more than a full season fantasy. You can go over to Prize Picks and pick a new team every single week. So whether you think Saquon Barkley will go more or less than 1 rushing touchdown, Joe Burrow will go more or less than 2.5 passing touchdowns, and Josh Allen will go more or less than 270 passing yards. That can be your 3 players for the week. You make that choice more or less on those stat projections, and you can win up to 2,000 times your cash over on Prize Picks. And again, this is the best way to watch football season. 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you can cash in. Also, injury reboots. So if one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, picks won't count it as a loss. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So head over there, download the app. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. And right now, when you head over there, Prize Picks with code CLNS, you can get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, visit Prize Picks, download the app, use the code CLNS, and you can get 50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get 50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So let's go on to this Hawks season, what you're expecting. You mentioned some of the additions. Alexander Walker, Luke Kennard is here, so they get a shooter. Karis LeVert goes out the door. I don't think that's a massive loss with some of the stuff they picked up here, but we'll see. I still, when I think back to last season, moving on from DeAndre Hunter, to me, still tough because he was so good at that wing spot when you think about, how they're going to line up late in a game, maybe moving Jalen Johnson over to the 3. If he can do that, I guess it doesn't matter as much, but that to me was a tough loss looking back on it. So where are you expecting this team to position themselves in the East? I'm higher on them than you probably because I just love this team and I can't quit. I have them 4th in the East, depending on what happens with Detroit, as they try to figure out this Beasley thing. So that would be like when I was thinking about it, that's like a 10-win based on what the 4 seed was last year. That's like a 10-win improvement for the Hawks, which would be pretty substantial, especially when this is mostly the same roster as a year ago, a couple differences, but they'd have to be significantly better defensively. These new guys would have to have massive seasons, and Trey's progression toward a new role, which I think quietly went pretty well last year, would have to continue and flourish. And obviously health would have to be at its best possible version for this team to succeed at that level too. So a lot has to go right here. But again, we've said it a million times as we start to preview the East. The East is wide open, and this is one of the teams that's healthy, set, deep, and pretty loaded when you look at the rosters across the conference.
Yeah, I think the big thing is simply the health. It's just that this team has never been able to consistently stay healthy over the past, 3, 4 years that I've been covering this team, especially at significant moments throughout the season. You think of when they lost Jalen Johnson last year, they were almost as high as 4 or 5 without the pieces that they currently have on the roster this year. So when he goes down, it just ultimately changes everything that they're doing. And I think they've added a few more contingencies that, should mitigate that if that were to be the case. But he's just such a significant part of this offense that losing him at any point will hurt. But I think the big thing is as you mentioned, just them clicking almost as soon as possible. I think the big question for me is just how Trey and Alexander Walker kind of fit together, how Trey and Porzingis fit together. Just because I do think that, Trey has the ability to make people better when, they come to Atlanta just because of his ability to pass the ball, his court vision, and his ability to kind of work in the pick and roll. So I think that's a big thing that people want to see is, what does that pick and roll look like with Porzingis in the fold? So I think if they can figure that out pretty quickly, then I think things will look really good. But for me, I think just because of how unhealthy the team has been, I have them, at their worst 6. And their ceiling to me is probably I want to say 4 just because Detroit is such a question mark to me, but I think they're gonna be 5. I think that's their ceiling. I'm just gonna like keep the expectations as neutral as possible.
Well, I think the ceiling could be even higher than that, just based off other teams having issues, and we know where the Celtics are at. Indiana's hurt. Cleveland's pretty hurt at this point, which I think is going under the radar. Darius Garland starting the year injured, and now Max Strus missing a couple months. So I think there's an even higher ceiling than that. Now, I love Orlando even more than I do Atlanta, so I think they're going to take a leap, probably win that division. So there's a bunch of teams that they have to leap in terms of last year, where they were at 40 and 42. Again, 4 seed would take 50 wins. So I feel good about it because of the fact that the conference is down a little bit. They've made some nice improvements here, and they were hurt last year and still won 40 games. All the time Johnson missed, numerous other guys going down at different points. So that to me makes me confident. My concern is that this team's been floating around 500 since 2021, regardless of what they have on the roster. And I wonder if that's beyond what they have around Trey and more emblematic of what a Trey team is, capable of. Of course, they went to the East Finals in 2021, so that would be the counter to that they've won at a high level and gone deep in the playoffs before with him. But since then, it's been a lot of the same, and that's what gives me pause about going too far with what I think this team's capable of. There's definitely a best version of this team that could maybe even reach these finals again, just based on where this conference is. But again, they've just been floating in that playing territory for so long that until I see them rise above that, and to be fair, they did it at the start of last year. They came into Boston, beat the Celtics twice. They were in that home court territory in the East before the injury struck. So that makes me feel better, and that's why I do say this will be a home court team in the East next year. But I'm still scared to make that pick just because of how it's gone these last handful of years and the health, which we've discussed.
Yeah, I think, I think it goes back to the health because when you even think about, those playing years, part of it, significant injury to Jalen Johnson. I know we keep harping on that. The year before that, it was a significant injury to Trey where he fractured I believe it was like his left pinky finger, and that kept him out a significant amount of time. And they were leaning
He missed
on
a handful of games this year too, didn't he? He got to he was 76. That's fine.
He was pretty durable this season. The Achilles was just touch and go at the beginning of the season, but he kind of played through that. And then the year before that, they got to the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs against Boston. And so I just think the big thing is that if the core, like 8 guys can stay healthy, then things are going to be okay. Because I think after that, there's just kind of a significant drop off. I mean, you're thinking about Vik Krejci, Milk Gay, again, who we talk about just, yes, he has a lot of potential, but he's just super raw. He hasn't had that much experience playing basketball at a significantly high level.
These are guys that could win your regular season games, though, I think.
Sure, but not in the postseason. And
Right.
That's kind of what we're talking about at this point now. Kobe Buffkin has missed significant time. Then you have Nikola Juricic. Again, you mentioned N'Faly Dante, who Hawks fans haven't gotten to see a lot of. So I just think that, and Caleb Houston, who they kind of signed under the radar a little bit there. So it was. So I just think that there's still a lot of question marks once you get past, the main 8-man rotation. You're just not sure. It's not a lot of proven talent just yet.
It's a lot of good players, though, at the top end there. Young, Porzingis, Johnson, I'm so high on. I even think he's the most important player on this team at this point. And regardless of how this year goes, he's the one guy you can say is going to be part of this thing going forward. Alexander Walker, I don't know if I'm super high on him, but he definitely made a lot of strides up in Minnesota, and it was, worthwhile flyer there. Okongwu, super high on. Risache, obviously in the Rookie of the Year mix last year. Luke Kennard, good shooter, good player. Dyson Daniels was out of this world last year. And so what's that? 8 players that are really good. So that counts for something, and that gives you flexibility. It allows guys to miss games. And then there are guys deeper on the roster you just mentioned who I think can win regular season games. So I feel pretty good about picking this team despite my concerns. And who knows what happens from there. If you get Detroit round 1 or whoever that might be, that's a winnable series. And it's going to come down to Trey at a certain point at that, portion of the season. What can he do in the playoffs? How can he lead this group? What's the defensive ceiling for this team with him out there? And I almost feel like, I'm not his biggest fan, and I know there's some limitations to having him be your best player. But when you just look at the productivity over the last 4 years, let's say, I mean, we're talking about some top end level, at least statistical output, 26, 10 assists. The shooting efficiency comes and goes, and I think that's the problem with him alongside the defense. But, when you're thinking of the best players in the East next year, he could
His
be in the
defense
top
gets
5.
a little too much. I'm going to say this. His defense gets a little too much knock because he's just improved on it so much over the last few seasons, being probably like one of your second best, in terms of steals behind Dyson Daniels, which, yes, there's a big gap between the two, but his defense is a lot better than I think a lot of people give him credit for. But yes, you can argue about the efficiency. It's not quite what you would want your best player to have.
Yeah, and the tough part is the game's so built on going after a guy like that over and over and over again. I think that can wear on you as a player sometimes, and even as a team. So, they have a good personnel to make it work. If you put a big lineup around him, I think that's interesting. I definitely think they've tried to mitigate some of the, vulnerabilities that they have there on that end, but it just hasn't amounted to much improvement as a unit over the last handful of years here. And the offense has been great. Like, they've consistently put up great offensive numbers. Defensively, that's going to be what determines their ceiling this year. And they definitely have some pieces who can help them improve in that aspect. Porzingis too. And I'm excited to see what he and Trey can do together. Because, like I said, Jaylen Brown, who's not the best creator in the world, found a way to be awesome in the 2-man game with Porzingis. And we know that there's so much potential for pick and pop, pick and roll combinations between Young and Porzingis here. And he's been so efficient in those areas. The post-up game, if they can line up a mismatch there, has been almost unstoppable. And so when you look at the EuroBasket numbers you mentioned, slow start against Turkey, tough matchup. Estonia, he goes out 26-7, 2 blocks. That looks like Porzingis. A little slower against Jokic in Serbia. That's been a tough one for everybody for the most part. Portugal, I thought he got the best of Queta there, especially from 3. But he is 20% from 3 in this tournament. He's missed a few of those mismatch shots over guys from the mid-range. So you can definitely tell he's still getting his rhythm back. A lot of turnovers too, which I don't really understand. And as someone mentioned in the chat, he did find a way to play 5 games in 7 days, which is a positive here. So mixed results for sure for him in this tournament. But I guess the main takeaway is that he can get through all these minutes, play these games, and look somewhat like himself.
Yeah, I think, for somebody who missed so much time of basketball, for him to I just think they're meaningful minutes. And I think that's the big thing for him. Obviously, he'll have to get through training camp and everything like that. But I have been, and maybe I have too low of a bar, but I've been pretty impressed with what he's been able to do. And especially because you think about some of the people he's catching those passes from for those threes and catch and shoot. And it's not Trae Young. It's not one of your elite point guards. So I'll give him a little
And they've
bit
been
of
hurt.
leeway. And they've been hurt. So I'll give them a little bit. I'll give him a little bit of leeway in terms of some of that production. But
So looks good for them. They're going to play on Saturday against Lithuania. Both Porzingis and Neemias Queta will play on Saturday. And that's where the Celtics are turning at center. They are probably going to be starting Queta, who they did start for the first time ever in his career in that first game against Atlanta early this season. He played decently. He got pulled by Joe like a couple minutes into that game, who was super tough on him this season, and even later in the year got away from using him once Porzingis, Luke Cornet, and Al Horford were healthy. They are high on him. I know that for a fact. I think he's going to start this year. Don't know that for a fact, but he had this huge game against the Czech Republic. Against Porzingis, I thought he held his own. It was tough to get out and contest those Porzingis threes from how far he was shooting. But Porzingis had interesting comments about him, obviously coming back from, leaving the Celtics this offseason. And I got the full quote here. It was tough to put this part out first, but this is initially how he reacted to the question when he was asked about Queta starting this year for Boston. He said, "Starter? Good question. Who else is there?" He said he hadn't really been paying attention to the Celtics roster and almost seemed surprised. And this is the best part about covering Porzingis, Lauren, is you're going to get an authentic reaction like this. I feel like most players, if they got asked this, would be like, yeah, he's great. He's going to do a good job. He's grown a lot. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Porzingis hears this question and he's like, who's starting for that team? I don't even know. I don't even thought about that. I don't even know who's on that roster. And I feel like that's how a lot of the basketball world's probably looking at the Celtics right now. You're muted.
Yep, I realized it. I was reading the quote myself, but as somebody who's covered like a couple of Eastern Europeans over the last couple of years, Bogey, that honesty is very like normal for me.
It's so great.
It's honestly really awesome, just because you get kind of like unfiltered almost reaction to things. But I mean, I think he kind of cleaned it up a little bit. He says that Queta has been getting better over his career, and I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, who better to provide that sort of response than a guy that's been practicing with him? But as you said, like, who else is gonna start on that team? I don't even know if I can tell you, off the dome, who the rest of the Celtics centers are.
Said Coach Mazzulla has been pretty tough on him, that's for sure. I believe he's getting to the point where he deserves some real minutes, real rotation minutes. He's been putting in the work, and you can see it in how he's playing now in this tournament. I'm happy for Neemi. He's a great dude, really cool person. He puts in the time, puts in the work, and I'll be glad to see him get a lot of minutes this year. So it's looked good for him so far. As you mentioned, other options here. They signed Chris Boucher, who's been more of a 4. I feel like the last handful of years and most of his career. Luka Garza, who I love, but hasn't played much.
I love Luka Garza, but from what, and granted, he's gotten better since, me covering him when he was in Detroit, but I still wonder about him defensively. Obviously, he can shoot the ball, but I'd love to see, the steps that he's taken forward on the defensive end. I know he didn't get a ton of minutes in Minnesota with Gobert and
did he really play at all in Detroit?
He had a couple of meaningful minutes toward the end of the season when they started shutting some guys down, but not a ton.
Yeah, so I think he'll be playing primarily the backup minutes early. They'll figure it out from there. They got Amari Williams, who I don't suspect we'll see unless they start turning more toward development later in the year. So yeah, it's going to be Queta. And this is the question with him, because I'm watching him yesterday. It's his, again, 5th game in 7 days, just like with Porzingis there. They got the back-to-back. Playing 20, hasn't gotten to 30 minutes other than the first game. And you know what blew my mind? He's only played 30 minutes in a game once in his NBA career across all his seasons. So that's something he's going to have to do almost every night, depending on how the rotation shakes out here. And he's still not doing it quite yet in this tournament. 21, 23, 18, 22 after he got ejected in the third quarter of last game for yelling and one, which I know a lot of Celtics fans didn't like. But you did see him start to tail off a little bit in that last game against Estonia yesterday. He had 16 on 7 of 12 against Latvia, and Porzingis, again, thought he held his own in a tough matchup there. 7 rebounds, block. I think he blocked Porzingis, I want to say. I forget. But in this last game, 1 point in the first quarter, picked it up a little bit late, but missed 5 free throws, gets to 22 minutes again, but gets ejected. So who knows how the rest of the game would have went there. They win. They move on. It was an awesome game. I mean, this was incredible to watch down the stretch. His friend Rafael Lisboa saved him with this Steph Curry distance 3 late in the game. So they're moving on. They're going to play Germany with Tice, Schroeder, that whole crew who has been one of the better national teams going back a handful of years. The Wagners, just Franz, I think, because Mo's hurt. So that's going to be an uphill battle for them to win, but this is what they want to accomplish is moving on in this round. So I think he's shown well. I don't think he's going to make or break the Celtics team when you start to think about it. Like, they're going to figure out who to play at center. I keep comparing it to 2020 when they had Tice, to bring his name back up in there as starter. They made the East Finals. Why? Because it was Kemba, Tatum, Brown, all those great perimeter players, Smart. So that's the question. What's Derek White going to do? Jaylen Brown in the primary role? Simons, is he going to be here? Hauser, those guys on the perimeter, what are they going to do? Because I think they have enough at center to get by with Queta and others. This team's season's going to be decided by the Jalen's of the world, the Derek Whites of the world, those guys. And the fact that Tatum's not there to do all the things that he's done over the last handful of years, it's going to be the real story of this season. So what are you expecting from the Celtics this year? Muted.
Oh, I know. I was switching tabs. Yeah, it's just hard for me to completely gauge. I think you're going to have really good seasons out of some of those guys that you mentioned in Brown, Derek White. I would anticipate that, of course, Peyton Pritchard has a huge season because he's going to have a much bigger role with.
I didn't mention Pritchard. Yeah, he's
Yeah, I
actually
was
the guy I'm most
surprised.
confident about having a massive season this year.
Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more minutes to go around with Tatum still kind of working himself back from that Achilles injury. But yeah, I think I'm really high on Peyton Pritchard this season just because of that and what he was able to do, especially toward the end of the last year. So I don't know. It's hard for me to gauge just because they picked up so many guys who were kind of on the fringe of rosters last year just to sort of kind of balance out their books. And so I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about Josh Minot or Anthony Simons just because, he was not buried in Portland, but I didn't watch a lot of Trailblazers games.
Minot was buried. Simon just
Yeah.
wasn't watched by many people.
And then, a couple of the rest of the names on the roster, I forgot about Xavier Tillman. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of minutes when we were going back to our center talk. He should have more minutes, wouldn't you think?
I've forgotten about Tillman basically every time I've talked about this team. And for no disrespect,
I'm so sorry to him.
he stopped playing in November and never played again. And it got to the point where it was like, okay, is this basketball or is this physical? Because he's dealt with a knee thing going back to college.
I'm
That's
so sorry to him.
really limited him. And, it's too bad. He was playing finals minutes for this team a couple years ago, but he is there. I mean, you'd have to imagine he's going to get some minutes in this dynamic here, at least ahead of, Williams. So, yeah, he's still here. He survived the wave and stretch deadline, which I thought was significant. So, yeah, you got to mention him as part of this dynamic here, too. So I'll ask you this, because this is how I've been putting it to, everybody I've talked to here on the show. I think this 5-team sandwich here in the middle of the East is going to determine a lot. So I'll have you rank these teams. You got the Bucks, you got the Celtics, Sixers, Pacers, and Heat. I think that's going to be the 6 through 10 in the East.
Yeah.
So how would you rank those 5 teams?
I'm going to say Bucks at 6. I think I'm pretty high on the Bucks. I'd probably say 6 or 7, just because it's going to be very dependent on their big three's health. Um, uh, Actually, maybe I put the Pacers at 7, Sixers at 8.
Then Heat and Celtics.
Yeah. Well, oh, this is so hard.
It is.
Okay.
I mean, all 5 of those teams could have the same record.
Yeah. Mm, I would probably put the Celtics over the Heat.
That's fair. So the
But it's
teams I'm
hard for me
leaving out.
to. Sorry, go ahead.
The teams I'm leaving out in that sense, maybe unfairly, because I've heard a few people higher on the Raptors. I don't think they're going to be in the playoffs, but they could be, I guess. They came close late in the year. Bulls, I don't know. I feel like this is the year where the Bulls come apart. And I'm higher on Detroit, Atlanta, where I don't put them in that conversation. I put them above that group of teams there. Orlando as well, who's obviously in the play-in last year. I think Orlando is going to be like the 2 seed, could even be 1. I think they're going to be out of this world. So I'm high on them. Those 3 teams, I think, rise above here. And, it's especially interesting since the Pacers and Celtics are sort of going through the same thing here. Like, how are they both going to compare to each other? And, I do put the Pacers ahead of the Celtics just because Siakam's led a team before. Nemhard has led in Halliburton's place in a playoff situation. Carlisle's, as we saw last year, amazing. And they just have a lot of depth. And that's the thing with the Celtics. They're thin. If they suffer an injury or two, they could miss the playoffs entirely. Easily.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm so reserved, just because, White has been pretty durable, but Brown on the flip side has not. And he's such an X factor for them that I'm still unsure.
Well,
Unsure.
got a few more questions here, but I want to, while everyone's in the room here, shout out Game Time and show Game Time some love. Be a big help for us here at the Garden Report. You got football games coming up. Patriots playing on Sunday. So if you want to be in the building for that Raiders opener, head over to Game Time and check out the deals over there. And that's the thing over on Game Time. Deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. You can snag new ticket deals before anyone finds out by following your favorite teams in the Game Time app. And they got the lowest price guarantee, or they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So you're getting the best deal over on Game Time. And that's why I love it. There's so many great features in this app. Panoramic views of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're sitting. I love that one for concerts because you don't always know how the stage is going to be set up and this and that. You can see exactly what you're going to be seeing in the arena, in the park, wherever you're going. Still baseball games going on and playoffs coming up. The Red Sox are going to be in the playoffs. So if you want to be over at Fenway, if that's where they're going to be playing for that first round, Game Time's the spot to be. So download the app. Just go in there, check it out, look around, see what deals are available to you when you're thinking about going to a concert or baseball game, football game as that season gets started. And you will get $20 off your first purchase when you head over there, download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS with your first purchase, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. And again, really important time to go over there and support them. When you use their code CLNS, that lets them know we sent you. And they've been a great supporter of the Garden Report over the years here. So head over there. If you're even thinking about buying tickets right now, just go and use Game Time. Get that $20 off your first purchase over there. So check that out. And again, use the code CLNS to let them know we sent you. Oop, am I having some issues here? Can you hear me, Lauren? All right. Oh, weird. Hold on a second. I guess lost my sound. Can the chat still hear me? All right. I think I'm still coming through here. So, all right. Yeah, check out Game Time. Again, use code CLNS over there. Let them know we sent you. So, Lauren can't hear me right now. I don't know if the chat can hear me, but we are going to continue the conversation here. Again, can anyone hear me? Yeah, sounds like they can. I'll have you join back, Lauren. All right. Again, everyone can still hear me, right? Gonna have Lauren join back. In the meantime, before we wrap up our Celtics conversation here, I guess I'll weigh in quick on the Kawhi stuff that happened yesterday. Allegedly, Clippers circumvented the cap, and we got Lauren back over here. Can you hear me now, Lauren? Perfect. All right, I was gonna hit on some Clippers stuff, but we'll wrap this conversation here on the Celtics before we let you go. So, this is my question. Better season. And it's crazy that we're asking this, but it's a real question. Will the Hawks or Celtics have a better season in 2026?
I mean, I think the Hawks will have the better season, but I think one of the things that is a constant in the NBA is that things might always look good on paper, but then the reality of it just ends up looking a little bit different. So I still think anything could happen and there could be some surprises, but ultimately I do think the Hawks will have the better season just because of how the roster is structured right now. They have a little bit more depth, a little bit more experience that can weather potential injuries or just what can arise during a season. So long as they don't have any injuries, I think to like say Trae Young, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and this one looks obvious, right? Just based on where the Celtics are, but the Hawks actually have to go out and do it. And the Celtics have been better for so many years in a row now that I actually do think it's a question, how's this going to shake out once it's actually played out? I think, as I said, I have the Hawks 4. I have the Celtics 9 based on where I'm looking at it right now. So it's definitely not close on paper, but they actually have to go out and do it. So I think that's that. The last question I got for you on the Hawks front. Trae going into a contract year. How are they going to handle that?
I think he's going to play for his contract. I think he really likes Atlanta. I think he really likes being with Quinn Snyder and just how he's been able to kind of unfold parts of his game. I think that's one of the big things that has kind of, affected Trae's efficiency a little bit is just how much, the Hawks have asked him to do, especially in terms of stepping up his defense, being a much more willing facilitator and being a leader on the team. And so I do think that has played a little bit into the efficiency. And so I think because he enjoys this team and sort of the pieces that they have around him, I think he's going to do everything in his power to sort of earn that contract extension coming up. Does he get the money that he wants?
A lot of guys have gotten
It's hard.
squeezed in free agency, so it's a good
Yeah,
timing for the Hawks.
It's hard for me to see him getting exactly what he wants. I think there will be some concessions that both sides might need to make, but I do think he gets something. He's leaving here with something.
Well, that's a question for next offseason. I think it's smart to let him play out the year, see how it goes, have him play for the contract. I think that's in everybody's interest. Maybe not his. Maybe that's not what he would prefer necessarily, but I think that's the position they have him in, and they can figure out what they want to do going forward based on how this year goes. It's a great position for the Hawks to be in. They have an awesome roster. The East is wide open. I think the coach has had a handful of years now to instill what he wants there. So, this is the ultimate prove it year for that group. I don't think they'll come out of this year with any questions about where things are headed. I think it's going to be pretty clear based on how this year goes. The Celtics and them face let's see the schedule here. We've been previewing the schedule as well. January 17th, first time they're going to play each other. And they do play in Atlanta on my birthday. So hopefully that's where I'll be when I turn 28. So thanks, Lauren, for stopping by. Thank you for previewing the Hawks here. Again, you can check out all her coverage over at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and you can find her on Twitter at Williams Lauren L. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Bobby. Bye.
All right, and we're going to stick around here for a few more minutes. I want to shout out again Game Time because we had the little technical difficulties there. Go over there again, whether it's baseball game, football game, concerts going on as the summer comes to a close into September here. Check out all the things they have there for the best deals. And again, help out the Garden Report big time. This is a great, important stretch to have you go over there and use that code CLNS over on the Game Time app, and you will get $20 off your first purchase over there. So there's something in it for you as well. Terms apply. And Prize Picks with football getting started tonight. Big game tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, a ton of games going on. Get 50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup over there. Do in addition to your season-long fantasies. This is daily fantasy over on Prize Picks. $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup over there with the code CLNS. And of course, follow all of our coverage. We will have the guys down in Foxborough for Patriots Press Pass. Go subscribe to that channel and all the coverage that they're doing over there. It's amazing stuff. Taylor, Mike, and all the guys. You can follow the Garden Report at the Garden Report on Twitter, Celtics CLNS. Training camp coming up in just a handful of weeks. So follow or subscribe to the Celtics All Access channel for an inside look at the team coming up this year. We'll have all our great coverage with Noah, myself, and the rest in just a handful of weeks here. Shows as breaking news happens. A handful of things are starting to move around the NBA. Nets brought back Cam Thomas. The Warriors stuff's probably going to happen soon, I'd imagine, if Jonathan Kuminga picks up his qualifying offer as well. So we'll have some breaking news shows coming up as stuff starts to happen closer to camp here. I believe camp gets started on the 29th. And then Bruins Rinkside for all your Bruins coverage as they get going. And Red Sox Clubhouse. That's a big one. I've been over at Fenway a bunch, so please subscribe over there for Red Sox coverage as well, as it looks like they're going to make the playoffs. And of course, here on the main channel, turn on notifications for when we go live. Quick thought on the Kawhi stuff. I don't have a ton to say right now before I think this through further, because there were so many layers to this thing. I don't know if this is going to amount to tampering or circumventing the cap in particular in a way that the Joe Smith thing did. And if you haven't seen the history or you didn't remember or live through it, Joe Smith, the Wolves circumvented the cap. There was hard proof through an agent who was disgruntled, and that led the NBA under David Stern, of course, to take 5 first-round picks, void Smith's contract, suspend executives. I mean, the Timberwolves just got hammered over this thing here. So there will be significant penalty if the NBA finds that the Clippers circumvented the cap. And I believe they announced last night through their spokesman that the NBA is starting to look into the findings from Pablo Torre, the allegations that the Clippers used a sponsorship deal with Aspiration, this company that's now under investigation from the federal government, went bankrupt. I believe one of the co-founders got arrested. And the allegations here is that over $20 million went to Kawhi through this company from Steve Ballmer as additional payment beyond the max salary that the Clippers were paying him. And if that's the case, again, in the most severe outcome here, Kawhi gets released, his contract voided by the Clippers. The Clippers, who already have sent out their picks through 2030, would lose multiple, you would think, first-round picks into the 2030s. And Lawrence Frank, Steve Ballmer, those guys could face penalties themselves here. I think there's a lot of fallout that could come from this, either in other owners who, based on a prior reporting from The Athletic, had frustrations to begin with about Kawhi ending up there and questions about how that happened. There was a push from other owners, I believe, for Adam Silver to look into how that happened. And at that time, they didn't find anything that amounted to wrongdoing, but said they would reopen an investigation if more details became available. And there certainly are more details here from just an incredible podcast from Pablo Torre. So definitely recommend checking that out. I think this is going to go one of two ways. The other owners look and say, we don't want to open up any questions about what we're doing potentially. We don't want to hit Ballmer hard. You know, he's a great owner for this league. We're just going to turn the other cheek and, you know, have maybe a soft penalty just for how this looks, but without any hard evidence that their intention here was to circumvent the cap. And again, the Clippers have released a statement that this endorsement deal was independent of anything the Ballmer and the Clippers were doing at that time, which of course included a jersey partnership with the Aspiration Company. Apparently they parted ways in 2023. So they haven't been involved with each other for a number of years here. So there's definitely some plausible deniability that the Clippers are using right now. But when you look into the evidence, is there hard proof? That's going to be the question here, that the Clippers intended to circumvent the cap with this, that money went from Ballmer to Kawhi through the company. Without that, I don't think the NBA is going to be able to hammer them. But how hard do they push to find that, I think, is going to be determined by the other owners and how frustrated they are by what Ballmer potentially did here. So I think that's the fascinating part of this, is how the other owners feel about Ballmer right now and the Clippers. I think a lot of it's in their hands. But we'll react as information keeps flowing out. I'm sure there's going to be more things that come out of this incredible story by Pablo Torre on his podcast. So go check that out. And once we get the whole crew back together here for some breaking news, whatever else comes up with the Celtics here over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about this story as well. But just want to hit on that before we get out of here. Thanks to Lauren. Thanks to PrizePicks Game Time. Again, I think we're going to have some news here in the next handful of days as stuff starts moving. Cam Thomas goes back to the Nets for $6 million. They still have a lot of cap space to work with here, so I'm interested to see what they're going to do. Simons, is he on the Celtics? Do they move off him in the next couple of weeks? I think that's a question. And other than that, I think next big thing is going to be media day and hearing from Tatum, Missoula, and all the rest about how this year is going to go. So we'll be back next week. In the meantime, and enjoy the Patriots game this weekend. Again, go over to Patriots Press Pass for post game and coverage of that Raiders opener on Sunday. Games tonight, and turn on notifications for when we're live again here on the Garden Report. I'm Bobby Manning. We will talk to you soon. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way.
Yeah.
Slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke